all of our insights following the panel this afternoon. So I'll get started. So thank you to everyone who's online here, and thank you to our panelists as well. I want to start off by sharing a bit about first why this panel series was even created, just to give you a bit more context on what we hope to pull out of the session today. So like a lot of companies, we've been thinking about ways that we can be a fair and diverse company. And I think that this is especially important for a small company because as you grow, then you have a great foundation and processes to build off of to ensure that the new workforce you're bringing in is diverse and feels welcomed and empowered, and that's super important. So in our research, we actually noticed a lot of companies talking to other companies about how to increase the number of women or minorities that they have on their team, or how to do more intercompany activities. But there really wasn't a lot of conversations directed to women about how to apply into these industries and how to encourage them and build confidence on getting a job at these companies. And so we looked at a lot of other events, but we wondered if there are reasons such as, fear of the industry or lack of confidence that might be holding women back from applying into the industry. And so we really wanted to build a panel and a place that would help open up this conversation and really start building that confidence and answering a lot of questions that are currently in a lot of women's minds right now. So this panel was really set up to bring awareness about all the types of jobs that are actually available to women in the tech industry. We've talked a lot in our last panel about technical and non-technical roles, so that's a super interesting area to look back on. We do have the recording for that if you'd like to take a look. And I think there's been a big narrative generally about tech being scary. It's more technical, it's fast moving, and it's got a lot more acronyms than other industries. So we're hoping to today focus a lot on the hiring process. What does it look like when you're applying for a job in the tech industry? How can you really make the most out of the hiring process, build a great network, and hopefully land your first job in the tech industry? So to introduce myself, my name is Alex Hugo. I'm the Marketing and Lead Generation Manager here at Software Secured. I work very closely with Kate, who is also on this call. She's here with us today with also 4 other great panelists who generously offer their time to share some insights on their experience. They have combined experience with both the hiring end of things and actually being hired in the tech industry, especially in some non-technical roles, which is where a lot of our audience seeks advice on. So this is going to be super helpful. That being said, I'm super excited to introduce, first of all, Lily Yoon. She is our head of growth at Gradient Works. She has had over 10 years in building and leading tech sales teams. She's passionate about increasing diversity in tech sales and helping sales teams that she works in to increase attainment via better territory design. So she brings experience from both the hiring perspective as well as her experience building strong, diverse, and growth-oriented teams, and her own experience being hired and working in tech sales teams. So thank you, Lily, for joining us here. We also have with us Jen Paxton. She is the VP People at Smile. She heads up all things people and recruiting. And over the last decade, she's developed a passion for building and scaling startups, 3 of which, by the way, have led to successful acquisitions. She focuses on giving employees structure and support that they need to flourish and grow within their roles. So doing that, she works with coaching managers, fostering a good feedback culture, and bringing in programs that will help employees develop a sense of belonging. And in addition to her full-time role at Smile, she's also co-founder of Jammer. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes,
is it Jammer?
Jammer, yeah.
Okay, great. So Jammer, and it's a SaaS-based platform that helps scale recruiting and onboarding processes through video content. So that's super impressive as well. So thank you, Jen. Thanks. And we also have Alicia Voss. She is an executive recruiter at Magna Search Group. In her role, she recruits executive and C-level talent for hypergrowth tech startups across Canada and the US. So she works with businesses of all sizes, from seed round up to Series D. So she's got lots of experience with how different business sizes operate. And in her work, she works with client companies to help build them strong diversity, equity, and inclusion processes to help bring healthy hiring practices to the forefront of the company's hiring operations. So welcome, Alicia. And we also have Claudia Gasson. She is the founder at Ortus Talent. So with a decade of experience in recruitment and technology across the globe, mind you, Claudia recently launched Ortus Talent as a dedicated technology to help digital-first companies access recruiting expertise with a very hands-on approach. So it's a super great way to start already bringing the conversation about how to recruit and recruit well. So she brings with her a lot of experience as well on both sides of the technical recruitment side, as well as working on sales teams in the tech industry. So thank you and welcome, Claudia, as well. Awesome. So I just want to cover a few housekeeping items before we get started. We'll be working through a few of our most anticipated questions with our panelists throughout the session. But if you do have any other questions to ask, please, whether it's general or to a specific panelist, please put it into the chat or the Q&A. And Kate will be keeping an eye on this throughout the discussion and hoping to answer them as they come in. And then if there's any questions directed for a panelist, we can, if there's an opportunity to do that during the conversation, we'll absolutely work on that. And then if not, there's going to be time at the end for answering those as well. Awesome. So finally ready to get started with our first question. So I think to start off this conversation, we really need to take a wide look at the hiring process in the tech industry. And I think the point where that starts in terms of our conversation is, how do you even apply for a job? Where are they? Where do you go looking for them? So I first want to pose this question to Jen. So aside from cold applying with your resume through a job posting, what other strategies can someone do to get attention from recruiters or try to differentiate themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that I found super helpful and has been, really, really resonated, especially with anyone I talk to that's looking for a job, is just to be networking. So you're talking to as many people as you can within your industry. If there is a company that you're really interested in, you're reaching directly out on LinkedIn to say, hey, I'm really interested in your company. Would love to hear, your experience or about your role, and getting to learn more about the company that way through more of these like warm introductions. And then you can actually even use that networking to get additional introductions to other places as well. People will reach out to me and say like, hey, I'm really looking like for a new job, would love to get kind of your insight. And usually at the end of that conversation, I'm like, hey, is there anybody you want me to introduce you to, so that you can actually meet another person? So it's really about expanding kind of just your reach and your exposure. And then the other one I will say as well, there's a woman who is transitioning from a teaching role into tech sales recently, and she sent out a video of herself like to all these different companies, and it was really engaging. She actually got a job very quickly that way, and I was so excited for her for this. I am a little bit biased about video because it's what Jammer does as well, but it is definitely something that is new, and people are going to be more likely, I would say, to get back to you, to respond at least and say, hey, like, thanks for reaching out. Can't like not interested now, or like, hey, like, let's set up a conversation. So I'd start with the networking side of it. And then if you can record, a quick 20-second video of yourself, just who you are and what you're looking to do, that really comes in handy.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I think it's, especially looking at, you can kind of think of it like a butterfly effect, seeing how your current network can expose you to other possible hiring managers, and that's super helpful. And as well as the non-traditional method of video applications is such a new, great approach and a great way to show them your communication and who you are as a person and how you really relate to that role that you want to apply to. So thank you so much for that, Jen. Now, Lily, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this as well. As someone who's worked from a non-technical role in a tech company from the sales side, and who's also been hired in the tech industry, how does someone find jobs that aren't advertised publicly, and how would you recommend that they try to differentiate themselves?
Yeah, similar, absolutely agree with everything Jen said too. Like a lot of those touch points, like really great ways to continuously build relationships and find new opportunities. And some of the things that I've seen that are really interesting. So I have a history of like interviewing and hiring SDRs and full cycle AEs, and also come from a background of transitioning from like a B2C closing role into my first tech sales role. So it's a challenging task figuring out like, what is the tech industry exactly, and like, how do I go about doing these interviews in a successful way? And the networking aspect is huge. I didn't do a really good job at it when I first interviewed for a tech company, but I think there are a lot of great resources out there. Like there are a lot of sales Slack communities nowadays where anybody can really join, and hiring managers are posting their open jobs there too. And usually it's actually the hiring manager that's posting it, right? So it's a direct line of communication. You don't have to search for their email. You can just Slack them and ask them about more information or find ways to like appeal to them with like your skill sets. And then some of the cool things that I've seen on the hiring side that people have done that I really liked was, you know, you can't hire everybody that you interview, but there are people that are really great and talented. And someone actually, I've had several people do this. Like, even though I told them, hey, right now, you know, we decided to move with another candidate, but we'll keep you in mind for the future. They're just like, hey, I know I saw that on LinkedIn. You're connected to this sales leader. I saw they're also hiring. Would you be open to doing a direct intro for me? And I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like, I really enjoyed like you as a candidate and thought you would be a good fit, but just I have a headcount number, right? I have to adhere to. And so I'm more than happy to refer people to other sales leaders in my network. And so I thought that was a really creative way. And I still have people text me every once in a while being like, hey, saw you're connected to this person. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. I'll send it over your information to them. So that's something that I found that was a very tactical approach that was smart in using their network.
Yeah, this is super good insight. I think there's useful information in what you just said, and kind of like the give and take of networking. Sometimes you're reaching out to your network for advice or information to help guide you. And then sometimes you find a great candidate or great resources that then you can turn back into your network and help them along their journey as well too. So that's a really interesting and helpful point. Now, another concern that women frequently face when applying for jobs is also the uncertainty if the company workplace or culture is going to be a good fit for them. So Claudia, I want to pose this question to you first to get your insights on how can women identify if a company is fair, diverse, and actually has a culture for empowering women?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the first step is always just do your research. So it's really simple to obviously check out someone's website, check out the content on there, have a look at the careers page. Is there anything noted around D&I initiatives, empowering, not only women, but lots of different things like LGBTQ and all that good stuff. So I guess doing firstly website, and then definitely going onto the social media. So, and checking out like PR press releases, anything like that. Look at their content, see what they're saying. Looking at the leadership board, obviously, is there representation there? Is there diversity in their leadership team, in their management teams? What initiatives can you see that they've maybe run? Check out like their tweets, any LinkedIn posts that the leadership team are talking about. Do they talk about diversity? Do they talk about empowering women in the workforce? That will give you a great indication. If you see all that good stuff and they're hosting events about it, that's obviously something that they're really demonstrating to do. In addition to that, I'd say, ask about the journey of a female in the business and what has their development really looked like. So, talk about, maybe try and pick someone that you found on LinkedIn. It shows you've done your research, and say, what was their journey? How were they promoted within the business? And what did you do to really help them and encourage them to be a leader in the business? So that will really give you really honest insights into the business, and understand where they position themselves within that and what their thoughts are really on diversity and pushing women into leadership and into tech.
Absolutely. I think focusing on actions that they're actually taking, looking at who they've actually hired, what events they're hosting, it shows that a bit of accountability of they're not just communicating it, but they're out there and they're doing what they committed to doing as a company. They are
absolutely
living by their values, and that's super important to look for in a company. So that's a great answer. Thank you so much. Alicia, I'm also interested to hear your thoughts on this. What are some key indicators that a company will have a very inclusive workplace in your experience?
Yeah, I think this is an incredible question and something that everyone really needs to consider when joining a new company. And I think Claudia really hit the nail on the head there, looking at what their executive team looks like. Is someone like me going to fit into a position like this? Or, looking at the exec team, is it all white men? Like, that's something that is definitely a potential red flag, and seeing how they prioritize the female voice or the POC voice. Clearly, that might be something that they're not doing as well currently. But you can't always judge a book by its cover. Like, just because the exec team may look a certain way doesn't mean that they aren't prioritizing diversity initiatives. Again, like Claudia said, looking at what kind of events they're hosting and what the rest of their team looks like, and how the leadership team is composed from then on is also a great way to be able to tell. But what I would say is really the best way to figure out if this company's culture is something that is going to work for you is just ask them. Like, talk to them during the interview phase, discuss with the hiring manager, or a lot of the times the first round of interviews is going to be with an HR rep, or someone who really is hands-on with those policies and knows exactly what kind of diversity standpoints they're taking. Excuse me. But saying to them, what does your culture look like, and how does someone like me, a woman or a POC or someone from the LGBT community, how are opportunities offered for these kind of groups, or what kind of leadership training programs do you offer that are specific to women, or some of these other groups? Who's in charge of the hiring process? How are these decisions made, and how are you ensuring that a diverse pipeline is always at the forefront of the hiring process? And then, another good point to make too is, of course, a lot of companies hopefully are prioritizing these diverse work groups and culture and all of that kind of thing as well. But asking them, where are your pain points? Like, where does the company need to improve as it comes to DEI initiatives? What kind of things are you lacking? How are you, how are you planning on getting to a point where you're no longer having these pain points? So by having these tough conversations and, really being open and discussing these kind of topics, that is going to be something that is going to tell you right off the bat, is this kind of company the kind of company you want to be a part of? Are they being super open and saying, hey, yeah, great questions. These are the kind of things that we love to see in a potential candidate. We want to see that you're prioritizing the same things that we are, that we hold the same company values, like here's X, Y, and Z, and all of the things that we talked about, or are they kind of like, yeah, it's something we're working on?
For sure. I think.
Oh, sorry.
I think my internet cut out. Continue.
No, that's okay. I was finishing up anyways. I was just saying, if they're kind of hesitating to give those answers, that might be a sign that they're not as, they don't hold the same values, and that it might not be a company that you're going to want to be a part of. But yeah, I think having those open conversations really is the best way to figure out if the company's culture is something that aligns with your own.
For sure. I think making it a very open and blunt and direct conversation is such a great way to go about it. Just asking them specifically, asking yourself, can I see myself with this particular group of people, is one thing. And then asking them directly, what does your culture look like? How do I fit in? What opportunities are available for me here? And what is your plan? And being able to get answers to these right away also gives you something to hold them accountable to make sure that as your career grows in this company, that you have some benchmarks that you're working with, and some expectations for the future as well too. So that's a super, super great point. Thank you so much, Alicia. So far in our conversation, we've looked at various ways to connect to jobs and just different ways to try to differentiate yourself in the hiring process so that you can stand out. And now I kind of want to take a dive into the actual hiring process. So this includes going through interviews, communicating with recruiters, discussing the offer, everything between applying for the job and signing the contract. So Jen, I'm interested to learn your point of view as a hiring and people leader in multiple high growth startups. What areas have you seen women typically struggle with the most during the hiring process? And what would you recommend to them to overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've seen and experienced myself, personally, is women will get very attached to a company emotionally, but then forget about, they're running a business and you need to remember, your worth here too. So from a negotiation standpoint, that can be something that gets left out or is very much, a huge challenge because, at least again, speaking from myself, like you can get personally invested in the company and have such an emotional connection to it that you're like, well, I'll just take a pay cut or I'll just do this. And then if you get in and you learn other people negotiated for higher, but you're doing the same job or you're, above them, that is a horrible feeling. So I always encourage people to, if the role, if the job salary kind of compensation isn't posted on the job description, which I would encourage more companies to do and be very, very open and transparent about. If it's not posted, then in that initial conversation that you're having with the head of HR or the head of recruiting or whoever kind of that initial phone conversation is with, to be asking like, hey, what's the range that you're considering for this role? And then also going a little bit further and saying, how are you defining what that range actually is and how people, grade within that range as well? Because sometimes companies struggle to answer that question. And then sometimes, companies are very hard to negotiate with sometimes too. And so you want to be able to have that conversation up front. And then I also encourage candidates to know their own worth. So to visit sites like salary.com or PayScale and actually get an understanding of, hey, what is the market rate for, this customer success role right now? And then you go in with so much more data and hopefully so much more confidence that you're not struggling to have that kind of negotiation conversation. On the company side, when people are coming to me and if they say, hey, like I'm looking for this and it's below our budget or in our budget or whatever, I'm very honest with them about like, hey, like this is what our range is. This is what we're targeting for it because this is in our compensation philosophy. So I want to encourage you to ask for more money. And I've actually had to do that a few times in conversations saying, hey, like you're underpricing yourself at this point. And please go look at these sites and see what the market rate is for this. Because if you base it on what your last salary is, you're going to be underpricing yourself very, very quickly here, especially with kind of the market and where it has gone now. So yeah, that's what I would say is, ask the range up front if they don't post it. Check out salary.com and PayScale to be able to see, what is kind of the market rate for your role right now. And then go in with confidence and say, I know my worth here. I really am excited about the opportunity. And you can still have that emotional connection, but you also want to make sure that you feel like you're being paid fairly and definitely equitably for the work that you're doing and the impact that you're going to have with the company.
Absolutely. I love how actionable that is. Knowing that there's great places that you can go research what your value should be in the marketplace today is super important and super helpful to, especially if you're new to the industry and you don't know how it stacks up compared to another industry, being able to do the research is really going to know kind of what you're working with. And then just asking right away in the first session you have, getting it all out on the table, what are we really working with here? Setting expectations as early as possible. And the importance of the hiring managers and recruiters in vouching for their candidates and making sure that they're not not allowing a candidate to underprice themselves and showing them this is actually your worth. You have great skills, you have great experience, and this is your true value in the marketplace. As such an important, and I think an area that not a lot of people talk about is the role that hiring managers and recruiters can actually play in helping candidates build that confidence in themselves. And so thank you so much for your sharing that with us. And Claudia, I'd like to hear your insights on this too. What areas do you see women struggle with in the hiring process, and what would you recommend to them to overcome these challenges?
Absolutely. So I guess just to add as well to that point, I think it's really important that you can utilize the likes of Alicia or myself as external headhunters to benchmark salaries. Be like, we're working on this. Is the role that I'm applying for, is it competitive? That kind of thing, and we can give you valuable market data around that as well. So, trust in your recruiter as well. Definitely, as Alex was saying too. So that is awesome. But I guess for me, the key thing that I think females struggle with in the hiring process is just applying in the first place. I think a lot of us might not have the confidence, or might struggle a little bit with imposter syndrome. Just apply. What's the worst that can happen? You can have an initial conversation, normally with like the hiring manager or a recruiter, and really understand more about the role, and then you can decide if it's a good fit or not, and therefore you can decide if you want to progress with that application or not. I think also one thing that I see especially is females going into leadership and us having to coach them into it. Sometimes they do lack that confidence as well, but I think ultimately just you've earned your place at the table, and never forget that. What have you got to lose if you don't get it? You get rejected, but you can always go back another time and try when you feel a little bit more confident, when you have a bit more experience. I think in addition to that, where we have, especially with non-tech hiring within sales and marketing roles, you'll often get a stage in the hiring process, which is a presentation, for example. Now, my key advice for that is honestly just take the time to prepare for your presentation and get feedback on it. So, you know, maybe go to your recruiter that you're working with externally. You can even, I see it quite a lot now that people within the hiring process at the business will often offer their feedback and want to help the candidates to get through that. And that also shows engagement, because they'll be like, okay, this candidate really cares. And it'll be, honestly, you probably set yourself above the rest if you do that and reach out to the individual hiring managers as well. So I highly recommend that. And you'll feel more confident, you'll build those relationships too. And I think that would be it's just such a good keynote to remember, to get feedback, prepare, and you'll smash it.
Yeah, that's a super great point. I love the point about, you know, just apply. You won't ever get the job if you don't apply or put your interest out there. So that's the first step, and it's super important.
Sure.
And then when you are in those conversations with your hiring team, getting feedback will help you improve on future application processes and also show the level of initiative and care that you really have for the position.
Absolutely.
Yeah, super helpful. Thanks, Claudia. So that's super great conversation. And I want to move on to another look at the hiring process, another kind of challenge that people seem to have. So a big divide has always been between the technical side as well as the non-technical side. You know, technical roles being something like a software developer, whereas non-technical roles is something like a project manager or a sales position. So these types of roles operate very differently in the day-to-day. So it's likely to assume that they have very different hiring processes as well. And there's different ways to prepare and stand out in these very different hiring processes. So Lily, I'm interested to know from your perspective, working in high growth companies as well too, and seeing on growth teams working with sales teams and working closely with technical and non-technical teams, how would you recommend that people prepare for each type of interview, and how do you really see those differences as well?
Yeah, great question. So my experience is probably more interesting for people who are somewhat interested in the sales side of things, but within the sales category, we have like solutions engineers or people who are more of the technical person on these sales calls, building out these custom demos or custom solutions for our clients. And so when I break it down, I have like two groups of people. You have the non-technical sales role. And my criteria, I work with my team on this of like figuring out what's our hiring profile, what type of candidate would be really successful in the full cycle non-technical sales role, and then what's my hiring profile for a technical sales person. So and based off of that, then we go into our product of like, hey, what is a necessary criteria of understanding and being able to utilize and showcase and build utilizing our product. And we take the core components. So for example, ours is like, you have to have a really good understanding of like problem solving, because we're helping people solve the challenges of like territories, right? So it's like a big thing that impacts sales teams attainment. And so they're actually problem solvers. They're like having to go in and be like, what is your actual challenge and how do we translate the solution into a technological sense that we can build out for you? And so that translates to then the interview process, of like, okay, what type of exam or can we do a test to see like what's their problem solving skills and the level of the problem solving that they can do. And so for example, on that side, we do something like a flow chart, like, hey, tell me a process that you've done before that you've seen as a sales team where you've seen leads get routed and they get round robin, and just map that out in a visual sense. So that's one of our examples for test interview. And then on the non-technical role side, it's more so like, can this person have a process in place that have the skill sets of like emails, like emailing is a huge part of sales calls. Project management is also one too, where you take a client from initial discovery call, all the way through InfoSec review and negotiations to close. So being someone who can do that step-by-step process we typically do more of we ask them to do like a mock discovery. So we say, hey, this is the customer that you have to like demo, prepare, and you have 30 minutes to do a discovery call with us, and we'll do a mock scenario. And so it's a little different in like for each organization of what their ideal hiring profile is, but I would say that's how we've typically done it, and doing certain type of like quizzes or tests.
Sorry, just getting off mute there. Yeah, that was super helpful points. I think looking at it as core competencies that each different role would have, whether that's creative problem solving, working with a flow chart, or step-by-step communication processes that are very specific to the role. And so if somebody is looking to enter into a new role and prepare for an interview, being able to kind of break it down into what are these core competencies, these core skills that are needed for the role, and be able to practice for exercises that are going to be specific to that.
Yeah, and exactly like what you mentioned is the feedback loop too. Like I have people ask me afterwards of like, hey, what did you think? Can I get some feedback on it? But when they do, it really does stand out, because I'm like, yeah, you have 15 minutes, let's chat real quick and hop on a Zoom and I'll give you some feedback. And it makes a big difference in like the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. How many people, what percentage of people would you say actually reach back out to you for feedback?
Oh, maybe like less than 10%. I mean, I could probably like see their faces from like the times that I've actually remembered people asking for feedback. So not a lot, honestly.
Yeah. And Jen, would you say your experience of that is similar?
I have to agree. I was like, I need to talk. Yeah, no, like 100%. Lily, like not as many people do reach out for feedback, and it's really important to ask for it. And I think it's also an onus on the companies though to actually give the feedback. I know it can be really scary to give candid feedback to people, but at the same time, if you think about it from I'm trying to do best intent here. I want to like help you to grow. Here's this feedback that is going to potentially be a little critical, but also, balanced with the positive. That's really going to be helpful. But no, I would say not a lot of companies do it either. They will shy away from it. So, yeah.
Okay, that's helpful. It's kind of two sides. One, if a company is, or if the candidate is asking for feedback, that's such a great way to stand out and show initiative, especially if not a lot of people are currently doing that. But then also, if not a lot of companies are doing that, that's a great sign of a great company, that they want to be involved and they want to make you feel supported in your hiring process and already help you feel empowered before you're actually hired in the role. That's such a great sign of a healthy and supportive company. Awesome. So I think, Alicia, I want to get your opinion on this topic as well, too. So is there anything specific in non-technical or technical interviews that might help participants stand out, especially at the executive or C-level?
Yeah, absolutely. I work as a headhunter. So basically what that means is I go in and I search by LinkedIn profiles to find the candidates that are best fit for what my client is looking for. So even before the interview process, like trying to figure out technical versus non-technical roles, how do you get into those interview processes? And I guess, my biggest piece of advice would be in regard to your LinkedIn profile, like making sure that it is well-rounded for what it is that you're looking for. Someone who is on the technical side, looking for more of those technical roles, what we tend to look for is the non-technical skills, because that's what's going to set you apart from someone else who's technical, right? And vice versa, someone who is on the non-technical side, we're going to be kind of digging on, okay, what kind of technical skills does this person have to be able to, again, to set you apart from everyone else who's non-technical, right? So if you ever heard the phrase, dress for the job that you want, not the job you have, this is a really great way to think about your LinkedIn profile. So looking at, okay, what experience do I have? How can I show to potential hiring managers that I can be suited for a job that, maybe I don't have the experience for yet, but I want to move into that industry. So take a look at job descriptions that have been posted that you think that you would really like to, you would like a position like that, and see what kind of keywords they have in there, see what is written and what kind of experience you can leverage and put into your LinkedIn profile. So things like different softwares that you have experience with, Salesforce, HubSpot, what kind of audiences you've worked with before. Is your company more on that B2B side, or are you on the B2C or D2C side? What is it that you're doing? If you are, any key metrics that you're using, someone from marketing might use customer acquisition cost and long-term value, the CAC to LTV ratio, these kind of things that are lingo within these different industries are huge to put in your LinkedIn profile. Because when I'm looking for a marketing person, I'm going to search specifically like CAC, LTV, and if it's not in your profile, it's not going to come up in my search. The other aspect to that as well is I would encourage you to be specific in what kind of job you do and what it is that you're doing. So when you're writing your job title, even if you are a software engineer, okay, well, are you full stack engineer? Are you back end, front end? These people all do different things, right? Are you working on infrastructure, DevOps? What are you doing? Because that is going to tell me so much more than just software engineer. So I'm going to know right off the bat, like, yes, this person does front end infrastructure engineering. They're going to be a great fit for what my client is looking for. And, it might sound intuitive, but you'd be surprised. Like someone is not going to reach out to you if they're not sure if you're going to be a great fit. So adding as much detail as possible, even, adding some bullet points of exactly what you were doing in your company too for that position. Because, if you think about it, I'm sure someone like Jen has never looked at a resume and said, yeah, so just based off of this job title, I know exactly what this person did at this company in this role, right? Like you need that context. And your LinkedIn is your right away, your first introduction to these hiring managers or to these recruiters. So really making sure to fill out your LinkedIn profile, give that context, give that information is going to help. And, the other thing that I'll mention with that as well, I think has been kind of an overarching concept is add your recruiters on LinkedIn, add your hiring managers on LinkedIn, send those connection requests, because as Claudia was talking about earlier, they're going to be posting about different jobs that they are hiring for, or they know people who are hiring for other jobs, right? Like this is how you're going to build your network, and this is how you're going to be introducing yourself to them. So really being conscious about your social media presence, especially on something like LinkedIn, this is going to be huge for you. And I promise you'll start seeing some messages from people like me saying, hey, do you want a job in X industry? And it'll be much easier for you than having to necessarily like go out and really just fire through a ton of cold applies, right? So that would be my advice.
Yeah, it's super helpful. I think also encouraging people to start thinking long-term about their career goals, or not super long-term, but at least necessarily in the next few months, where do you want to see yourself? So that way you can build that LinkedIn profile that really caters to that, the area of work that you want to, that you've done now, but then also where do you want to be, and getting as catered and as niche of information as you can on there, because that puts you on that narrower list and makes it more likely that the headhunter, recruiter, or hiring manager who's looking for somebody to fill this very specific role, they know that you're going to be the right fit, and then you've got the qualifications and that specialization in that specific area. So that's super, super helpful to start thinking about. So that's all we had for our kind of more structured discussions. So I want to take a minute and thank our panelists for answering all of those great questions that I put out there. And I'll just check if we have a few Q&A questions. If not, I have a few that came in. So nothing in the Q&A now, but I do encourage anybody, if you do have any questions that came up during the conversation or anything else, please put it in the Q&A. In the meantime, I have some questions that came in as people were registering for the event. They were able to drop in a few things that they'd like to learn from our panelists. So I'm going to put this question out. Anybody who would like to take on this, feel free. So what are some questions that women should be asking their recruiter or hiring manager to gauge if this position is going to be the best for them? I know we spoke about asking about company culture, asking about what the pay range is. Is there anything else that women should be asking in their interview rounds?
I could definitely add to this. I teach, I coach a lot of candidates on, the types of questions that they should be asking in interview processes. So I guess some really key things are like really simple stuff around the business as an organization. So, what's your plan for the next 12 months, 3 years, that kind of thing, like really basic stuff like that. Like, is it geographical? Are you looking to expand geographically? Are you looking to add new products? And things like that, just really simple stuff around that to really sort of build the picture. In addition to that, asking questions around like, what has been your experience here? Tell me a bit more about your journey within the business. Where did you start? Why did you join the business in the first place? What attracted you to joining the business? Can you tell me about some key leaders within the business who have risen up through the ranks and why they've been so great and their journeys? You get a really good insight into their development plans and how they promote from within, which is going to be so critical for your professional development at the end of the day. So I think asking key questions around individuals and what their experience has been like, what they love about it, what they don't love about it, to have a really honest conversation, and then you can really understand if it's going to be the right kind of culture for you, the right kind of organization. Have they got the ambition that you feel that is going to fulfill you within your business, within your own goals and all that kind of thing. So I think that's really critical.
I love that one, Claudia. I'll add on, just because lots of companies are either fully remote or a hybrid or potentially even full in office, but all of those take different levels of collaboration. And so if you're just asking, hey, like, how do your teams best collaborate? What are the working styles, and what ways do they actually like to work together as a team? That can be really helpful as well, because then you get to know, hey, is this a place that I want to work? Is this a place where I want to brainstorm and collaborate with people because they collaborate like I do, or I feel like I'm going to be able to learn from them? So I always like to ask, how do your teams collaborate, or how do you collaborate with other members of the company?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I was just going to jump in and say quickly, I think one thing that I like to have my candidates ask as well is, walk me through what a world-class whatever is for you at this company. Like, obviously you have your job description, but there's always some things outside of the job description that you're going to be looking for, especially the hiring manager themselves. Sometimes between, the hiring manager, the CEO, like sometimes they have different profiles of what it is that they're looking for. So especially at different stages of the interview process, your HR person who you're talking to potentially first, like, might have some different answers for you than someone who's at the next stage, who's the direct hiring manager, versus, someone on the exec team, a founder or a CEO or something like that. So getting those different perspectives of what each stakeholder is looking for in this hire is super helpful, as well as asking them, okay, what does success look like in this role after 90 days, after 3 months, 6 months, a year? How am I going to be able to meet these KPIs? What are the KPIs? Like, what exactly is it that you're looking for from this person, so that you can really be prepared for what you're going to be stepping into this role. And then also, even thinking about that, you ask those at the first stages of the interview process. Near the later stages of the interview process, you have a much better idea of what you can expect in the role, and that you can speak to that later on with these more important stakeholders.
Yeah, and Alicia, to your point, like later stages in the interview process, especially like regardless of like it being a sales role, but especially for salespeople, it's really helpful to like ask, hey, can I see a demo of the product? Like, I don't want to submit a demo request form and then, mess up your MQL numbers. So can I just see a demo of it, or like a walkthrough, so I can get a better idea of like what the product does? And I think that can make a big difference in the hiring manager's perspective. Like, oh, this person is committed. They're really genuinely interested in the problems that our company is trying to solve, and they want to understand how our product does that. And that's something that I've only had a handful of people do as well with me, is like, can I see a product demo? And it actually leads to better conversations. And on the flip side, we hired a lot of like recent grads, so it's their first full-time job going into sales and SDR role. And what we learned is that people were joining and having a difficult time ramping, and we're like, I wonder what like is causing this like gap in our ramp time. And what we did is we started actually having people shadow an SDR, a full-time SDR at our company for like 30 minutes to 45 minutes, and be like, hey, take a look at what this person is doing day in and day out, or like in the next like 30 to 45 minutes. And that'll give you a good idea what this job is actually going to be like, not just us telling you what the requirements are.
Oh, Lily, I love that. Absolutely. Like, I don't hear that very often. And it also helps for candidates to understand more about the role and how they can be better. That's just, so I love that. Keep doing that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's so much to learn from a company just to make sure it's the right workplace for you, but then also to make sure it's the right type of product that you want to be working with. And doing a demo, especially even in the interview stages, is such a great way as well to make sure that this is the full picture of exactly what you want and there's that right alignment in place. And that you can ask, to Alicia's point, you can ask a lot of people in the company to try to get different perspectives of maybe how do the different levels see it? How does a junior level see it differently than the executive level? Or how does one department view it differently as well? Is all really helpful to create this big picture of what are you really getting yourself into? Is this what you want to be doing? And make sure all the green flags are in place. So that's super, super helpful discussion. We do have a few questions in the chat. So the first one here is to get your thoughts from anyone who'd like to answer this on why companies might be asking their candidates out surprise exercises instead of being open to share what the exercise is about. So why that practice might be happening. And then if it does happen, how can you excel in these exercises, and especially related to research roles is this question here.
I can start being a culprit of this, actually. We used to actually tell interview candidates, hey, you're here, you want to do a mock call, because SDRs do a lot of mock calls. And, you know, we had a few people actually give us really good feedback of like, hey, I wasn't expecting to do this. And I'm like, yeah, that's fair. And so we changed it up, and I was like, okay, we're going to actually tell them ahead of time, like, hey, expect a mock call, and prepare as much as you can, just so you know what we don't care about you knowing all the product knowledge. Just show us that you have like a general idea of like what the company does, and you're able to get to having a productive conversation to hopefully book a meeting. And so, yeah, I would say give that company that feedback if they do a surprise exercise on you, because it doesn't actually give it's really just one, seeing if the person can like think on their feet and roll with the punches more so than like actually seeing if this person can do 100% good job at nailing this cold call. But it does also like hinder people who do like to plan. I'm a planner. And so if someone sprung that on me, I'd be like, okay, you need to give me 10 minutes while I think about this, and then we can do this mock call. But so give the feedback to those the recruiter at the company and say like, hey, next time, just appreciate the heads up first. And so, we changed that ourselves, made sure that we told them to expect that. And yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is just like the heads up aspect instead of just springing the surprise exercise. It's important for sure.
To add to Lily's point as well, I think one way to sort of prepare yourself for that scenario is if they have told you that they're going to do a random like exercise, it probably won't be that random. It'll probably completely related to what the job is. So think about what you actually would be doing on a day-to-day, and then actually think about how you could get yourself in that position. You're probably going to do a little bit of role play at the end of the day, exactly as Lily has said. So just try and imagine, or they'll give you a little task which will be similar to what they want you to do, maybe in like tech or in marketing or something like that. So just try and think a little bit more deeply about what you'd be doing on a day-to-day, and they'll probably just get you to do something like that.
Yeah, I would just add super quickly, I think it's pretty rare for something like this to happen. Like most companies are pretty upfront about what the interview process is going to look like. But what I would say along the reasons of like potentially why, of course, Lily and Claudia just kind of gave a little bit more, but when you're looking at someone's resume or someone's profile on LinkedIn, like you can't really get a feel for these kind of things, like their personality, how they're going to have these conversations and what that's going to look like for them. You really only have the bullet points of what they say they do well, which of course is great, but that's kind of the point of the interview process, right? So that would be, a reason why they would have these exercises in there in the first place. And then in terms of the surprise, I think Lily and Claudia did a good job covering like why that might be the case. I just wanted to touch also briefly on this second piece here about related to research roles, like how you can do well in those specific types of exercise. I would say the biggest thing is really, like Alex actually brought this up earlier, just taking your time and really making sure that you are paying attention to details and you are really thinking about, okay, what is the bigger picture here? Like, why am I doing this research? What am I accomplishing here? What are the questions that they're asking me? Break things down if that helps you. Like, just make sure that you are answering the questions that they are asking you. Sometimes it's easy to kind of get flustered and think, okay, like this question is related to this question and this is this, like, how do I make sure that, like, just take your time and like think through things. And the other thing too is don't be afraid to ask for help. Like if you think about when you're in a position, rarely are you ever going to be on your own. It's like when you were in high school and your teacher said, "Yo, you're not going to have a calculator to do this math." Like that's not true. We all know it's not true. So, and of course, research is using your resources, right? So if you know someone who's excelling at the type of research you're doing, like feel free to reach out to them. Or if you know someone who wrote a PhD dissertation, like clearly they know how to do the research too. Like use your resources and feel free to do that. It's not something that they're gonna say like, "Oh, well, you got this information from someone else." Like you were doing your research, and that's kind of what that is. So that would be my advice to that aspect of the question.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alicia. I echo a lot of that. I think everyone, Lily, Claudia, Alicia had super great points on that. We do have another question in the chat as well, and I just want to make sure we're conscious of, we have about 5 minutes left. So I want to switch over to that question. And then in the next few minutes here as well, Kate will be putting a survey link into the chat. So keep an eye out for that. And for anybody who would like to provide some feedback about the event, if you felt like this was super helpful for you, or otherwise, please give us that feedback. It really helps us improve our future events. So again, just keep an eye out for that. But getting to the final question that we have here. So the question is, as a Latina, how authentic can you be during the interview? Can you share about yourself and your hobbies or not? Where's the line? And then how can you show how you are authentic and how to differentiate that in your interview?
I'll take this one. I think that you should be authentic and be who you are. I think there is always a line between like, hey, you want to make sure that you are presenting kind of your best self, but at the same time, your best self is you. So I would say be who you are. Hobbies do sometimes come up, but also I'll actually sometimes coach interviewers to not talk a ton about that part of their or ask questions about it, because it can get into some of the gray areas within HR that can be, not kind of potentially appropriate, or can get you into a little bit of hot water sometimes. So I always kind of have a little bit of a balance of, you want to be yourself, you want to show who you are. I mean, I present like I'm a mom. I have all these lovely pictures up and like, this is who I am. And like, I think it's great for people to get to know you as a person. But I also think you just have to be aware that you only have a certain amount of time that you're going to be able to talk through your skills and what you would bring to the table. So you as a person, you do want to bring that to the table, but you also want to be able to have the time to highlight your skills and how you're going to, really bring that to the company and learn more. So.
Yeah, Jen, I'm curious, what do you usually see as a good way to leverage hobby topics as an interviewee?
Well, I guess it really depends on the person. So like if the role actually has a lot of problem solving in it, which I feel like almost every role has some kind of problem solving, I will talk a little bit about like, hey, I really like to play Tetris. It is just a thing I like to do. And it's like rapid fire, these little blocks are coming down. I have to figure out where it's going to go. And like, it keeps me mentally agile, I guess, in that way. And it helps me to solve problems. So I think that could be a way to highlight, like, here's like a hobby, but also here's how it relates to a skill. The other thing I'll say personally for myself is like, I have a master's degree in opera. I love singing. Like, it's just a thing that I do. And the thing that I transfer over from that is I really love conversations and talking with people and being engaged and really kind of having that relationship. And you do that with like your audience when you're performing. So I think there are definitely ways that you can translate your hobbies to work. And that was a great prompt, Lily. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I'd also add as well for sales specifically, talking about if you have sports, like literally sales leaders love sporting people because it demonstrates that you can work in a team and also that you're competitive. And normally, you know, there are leadership boards within sales teams, you know, to really encourage top high performance culture, and therefore always disclose if you are a sporting person, or you know, you've done a marathon, or you know, all those things. It shows you've got dedication and discipline as well.
Yeah, that's super great insights. And yeah, we received great feedback from that in the chat as well too. So being mindful about time and making sure that what you're contributing in your interview about hobbies are related to the role. There's lots of different hobbies out there that all have very applicable and transferable skills to the work that you might be doing. So just being able to think deeply about how are the different things in my life contributing to my growth as a person and also as a professional. So that's super, super helpful. We are at the end of our hour, so I do want to take another minute to thank all of our panelists, Alicia, Claudia, Lily, and Jen. Thank you so much for spending an hour with us. More than an hour, because there was also a little bit of prep work leading up to the panel here today. So thank you so much. This was super, super insightful.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome. Thanks so much, team.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
having us.
It's nice meeting y'all.
Awesome. And recording will be sent out this afternoon as well too for anybody who wants to rewatch it.
Man.
All right.
Thanks, Alex.
See you all.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.